For 10 years, I carried a burden that was never mine to bear. 10 years of breaking my back, coming home exhausted, pushing past my limits, all for a debt I had no part in creating. My father-in-law's mortgage had hovered over my marriage like a dark cloud, a responsibility dumped on me the moment I said, "I do." And I, like a fool, took it upon myself to clear the skies. I told myself I was doing it for my wife, for our future, for the family that had embraced me. I worked longer hours, took on extra projects, declined vacations, and skipped outings with friends. Every penny I earned, every bonus I received, went toward wiping away the debt that wasn't mine. And after a decade, the impossible had finally happened. I had paid off my father-in-law's house in full. That night, I sat at a dinner table that should have felt like home. The aroma of well-seasoned meat filled the air, the low hum of conversation wrapped around the room like a warm embrace. Glasses clinked, plates shifted, and laughter, soft, familiar laughter, bubbled from my wife's lips as she spoke with her father. I let the moment breathe. I wanted to savor it before dropping the news. I turned to her, expecting her to sense my excitement, to reach for my hand in quiet anticipation. Maybe a quick glance, a secret smile, something that told me she understood the weight of what I had done. But she was deep in conversation, her attention fully on her father, her smile natural, effortless. And then, just as I parted my lips to speak, she did something I never saw coming. "Your wife's new husband will take over now." The words cut through the air like a dagger, silencing the room. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. The sentence was so casual, so flippant, that my mind struggled to piece it together. My grip tightened on the fork in my hand. I stared at her, waiting for clarification, waiting for the joke, waiting for anything that made sense of what she had just said. But she didn't laugh. She didn't correct herself. Instead, she smiled. Her father, seated at the head of the table, nodded in agreement. Like I was nothing more than a placeholder. Like my time had expired. Like I had served my purpose. A slow, seething heat crawled up my spine. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting, expecting a reaction. Shock, anger, humiliation. Anything to confirm that they had successfully blindsided me. But they didn't know me at all. I took a breath, forcing my expression to remain neutral. Every part of me wanted to demand an explanation, to throw my chair back and walk out, to make her feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. But that's what they wanted. And I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. I placed my fork down gently, methodically, as if I had suddenly lost my appetite. I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly, studying them both in silence. She was still smiling. She thought she had won. I shifted my gaze to my father-in-law, the man who had accepted my money year after year without hesitation, who had allowed me to carry the weight of his failures while never once offering to lift a finger. He had watched me sacrifice, watched me toil, and yet he had never seen me. Not really, because if he had, he would have known that this moment, was a mistake. My silence stretched long enough for discomfort to creep into the room. I could see it in the slight shift of her shoulders, the way she finally glanced at me, perhaps realizing that I wasn't reacting as expected. Good. I allowed a slow smile to form, but it wasn't the smile of a defeated man. It wasn't the smile of someone discarded, erased. No, it was something else entirely. Something they had never seen before. I nodded slowly, my decision crystallizing in that very moment. I was done playing the fool. I reached for my napkin, dabbing the corners of my mouth as if nothing had happened. I straightened my cuffs, adjusted my posture, and finally, pushed my chair back with deliberate ease. "Excuse me," I murmured, my voice even. And then I stood. I didn't offer another word. No questions, no arguments, no desperate attempts at understanding. They had made their choice. And now, it was time for me to make mine. As I walked away from that table, from that house, from the illusion of the life I had built, one thought anchored itself firmly in my mind. They thought they had outplayed me. They thought they had won. But they had no idea what was coming. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, staring at the past 10 years of my life, at the bank statements, the mortgage documents, the contracts that told a story of sacrifice, of patience, of loyalty. A loyalty that had been shattered in the span of a single dinner. By morning, everything had changed. I didn't sleep, not even for a second. By 3 a.m., I was still in my study, surrounded by stacks of documents, contracts, and financial statements. The weight of 10 years pressed down on me, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like fuel. Every piece of paper, every signature, every transaction, I had built this. And now, I would tear it down in a way they never saw coming. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house. The same house I had worked myself to the bone for. The same house that was supposed to be a symbol of security, of family, of love. Now it was nothing but a cage they thought they could lock me in while they moved on with their lives. I exhaled slowly and reached for my phone. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I scrolled through my contacts and called the one person who mattered now, my lawyer. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "This better be good," he muttered. "It's better than good," I said. "It's game-changing. Meet me at your office at 7 a.m. We have work to do." There was a pause, then a sigh. "You do realize it's the middle of the night?" "I do," I said, standing. "And by the time the sun rises, I plan to turn my entire life upside down. Be ready." I hung up before he could argue and turned back to the papers in front of me. Every document told a story. Every payment I had made, every sacrifice, every legal move I had carefully positioned over the years. These weren't just financial records. These were weapons, and I was about to use them. By dawn, I was dressed and out of the house before my wife even woke up. I didn't look back. There was no need. That life, that version of me, had already ceased to exist. The air was crisp as I drove toward my first destination. The streets were still waking up, the city bathed in the soft glow of morning light. My mind was razor-sharp, every step of my plan mapped out. At 8 a.m., I walked into the bank. The moment I stepped inside, a familiar face greeted me. The branch manager, a man who had shaken my hand countless times over the years, smiled politely. "Morning," he said. "What can we do for you today?" I returned his smile, though mine carried a different weight. "I need to make a few changes to some accounts," I said, sliding a folder onto the counter. "It's urgent." His eyes flicked to the paperwork, then back to me. He knew better than to ask questions. "Of course," he said, taking the folder. "I'll get started on this right away." As I turned to leave, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. 20 missed calls. All from my father-in-law. I smirked. The moment they realized what I had done, the panic had set in. I ignored the calls and kept moving. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in my lawyer's office. He looked at me, still half awake, his tie loose, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "All right," he said, rubbing his temple. "What's so urgent that you had to drag me out of bed?" I leaned forward, tapping the documents I had laid out on his desk. "I need to finalize these transfers. I need every legal loophole covered, and I need it done today." He scanned the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. "Wait a minute," he said, looking up. "This is the mortgage. You're telling me?" I nodded. "I own it." His eyebrows shot up. "You own their house?" "Correction," I said, sitting back. "I own everything. For 10 years, I had been the one making the payments. 10 years of my money, my sweat, my sacrifices. And in the fine print, buried under legal jargon, was the truth. Every transaction, every payment, every document had been signed under my name. Not my father-in-law's, not my wife's, mine. The house they lived in, the very roof over their heads, belonged to me. And now, I was taking it back. My lawyer let out a low whistle. "They're going to lose their minds over this," he said. "They already are," I muttered, glancing at my phone. 37 missed calls. It was barely 10 a.m., and they were already scrambling. Good. By 10:30 a.m., my lawyer made the necessary calls. The paperwork was processed, the final signatures were being stamped. At exactly 11 a.m., I walked out of that office a new man. The phone buzzed again. This time, a text. From my wife. "Call me. Now." I stared at the message for a long moment before locking the screen. She didn't deserve a response. Not yet. Instead, I turned my attention to the next step in my plan. Because while they were still waking up to the consequences of their betrayal, I was already miles ahead. And I wasn't finished yet. The moment I stepped out of my lawyer's office, the weight on my shoulders felt different. Not lighter, not gone, but transformed. It wasn't the weight of burden anymore. It was the weight of control, of power. I walked through the city streets with purpose, the morning air sharp and bracing against my skin. My phone buzzed in my pocket again, but I didn't need to check it. I already knew who it was. My father-in-law, my wife, her new husband. They had all woken up to a nightmare, one they had crafted with their own arrogance. I took my time. I wanted them to feel it. The confusion, the panic, the slow realization that their world was no longer theirs. That the man they had discarded wasn't just walking away quietly. He was walking away with everything they thought they still owned. By the time I reached the mortgage office, my lawyer was already waiting for me, his suit crisp, his demeanor professional. He had known me for years, had watched me sign check after check, had seen me pour money into that house, month after month, without hesitation. And now, he was seeing the result of all that patience. We stepped inside together, and the manager, an older man with glasses perched low on his nose, looked up as we approached his desk. "Morning, sir. How can I assist you?" I slid a folder across the desk and met his gaze steadily. "Pull up the deed for this property." He hesitated for only a second before typing into his system, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced ease. A few moments later, he frowned at the screen, then looked at me, uncertain. "This appears to be under your name, sir." I nodded slowly. "That's correct." The weight of the realization hit him almost immediately. His brows furrowed as he scrolled through the records, seeing years of payments, all traced back to me. Not my father-in-law, not my wife, just me. "Would you like to make any changes to the property?" he asked carefully. "Yes," I said, leaning forward. "I'd like to schedule an eviction." Silence. The manager blinked, then straightened his posture, clearing his throat. "Sir, are you certain? This is rather abrupt." I gave him a slow, deliberate smile. "It's already overdue." There was no need for emotion, no need for anger. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. They had assumed that because I was quiet, because I never made a fuss, because I did what was expected of me, I was weak. They were about to learn the truth. By 10:30 a.m., a team had been dispatched. By 11 a.m., I was on my way back to my office, my phone vibrating nonstop in my pocket. I ignored every call, every text. They could wait. At 11:45 a.m., my assistant knocked hesitantly on my office door. "Sir, there are some people waiting for you." I knew who it was before she even finished the sentence. "Let them in," I said, sitting back in my chair. The door swung open, and in stormed my father-in-law, my wife right behind him, her so-called new husband trailing awkwardly in the background. Their faces were pale, a mixture of confusion and anger swirling behind their eyes. They had expected resistance, maybe a fight, maybe some desperate pleading. But they had never expected this. My father-in-law was the first to speak. "You can't do this," he barked, slamming a hand against my desk. "This is my house." I tilted my head, unimpressed by the outburst. "No," I said calmly. "It's mine." He turned to my wife, as if expecting her to jump in and fix this. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had nothing to say. I leaned forward, pressing a button on my desk. A large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying the legal paperwork, the mortgage agreements, the transaction history, the deed with my name stamped on it. Her father stared at it, his face draining of color. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No," I said. "What's impossible is thinking you could outplay me." I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel it, to sit in the mess they had made. The new husband, the man she had so confidently replaced me with, finally cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, man," he started. "I don't want any trouble. I had no idea about any of this." I met his gaze, and for the first time, I felt something close to amusement. "You're not important enough for trouble." His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked at my wife, and for the first time, I saw it. Doubt. Regret. She had thought she was upgrading. She had thought she was moving on to something better. But standing here now, in my office, watching her father crumble, watching her new life unravel before her eyes, she knew. She had made the worst mistake of her life. My father-in-law's voice broke through the silence again. "You're ruining us," he said, voice lower now, less certain. I let out a slow breath and stood, walking to the window, looking out over the city skyline. "No," I said simply. "You ruined yourselves." I turned back to them, meeting my wife's eyes directly for the first time since this all began. "You thought I was weak," I said quietly. "You thought I'd just walk away, let you erase me. But you never understood who I was, did you?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Get out, I said. Her father stiffened. You can't. Get out. My voice was calm, steady, unshakable. And one by one, they turned and walked out of my office, the weight of their downfall pressing against them like a vice. As the door clicked shut behind them, I exhaled slowly, letting the last remnants of my old life slip away. They thought I was a pawn. They thought I was disposable. They were wrong. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking into something far greater. By noon, the storm I had unleashed was fully raging. The silence I had once been accustomed to had been replaced by an orchestra of chaos. Calls I wouldn't answer, texts I wouldn't read, and desperate attempts at damage control that had already failed before they even started. I sat at my desk, calm, methodical, while the world outside spun itself into panic. I knew they were coming. I knew the moment reality settled in. The moment they realized I wasn't playing along anymore, they would run straight to me. And sure enough, my office door burst open. My father-in-law was the first one in, his face red with anger, eyes wide with disbelief. My wife followed, but this time, there was no confidence in her stride, no smugness in her expression. And, of course, standing awkwardly beside her was the man she had chosen to replace me with. I let them have their moment. You can't do this, her father barked. His voice was raw, desperate. You have no right. I leaned back in my chair, watching him, studying him. I already did, I said simply. My wife swallowed hard, her eyes darting between me and the papers on my desk. For the first time, I saw the weight of realization settling in. Her father, however, wasn't ready to accept it. That house is mine, he snapped, his hands gripping the edge of my desk like he could hold on to something slipping from his grasp. No, I said, my tone deliberate. It was mine the moment I paid for it. He turned to his daughter now, eyes wild with disbelief. Say something, he demanded. She hesitated. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had no words. I smiled, slow and deliberate. You don't understand yet, do you? I asked, my voice steady. I reached forward and tapped a button on my computer. A large screen behind me flickered to life, displaying the documents I had been waiting to show them. The deed, the mortgage records, the official transfer of ownership. Every legal proof they needed to see. My father-in-law's eyes widened as he scanned the screen. His face went from furious to pale in seconds. This is impossible, he muttered. I exhaled, my fingers tapping the desk lightly. What's impossible is thinking you could outplay me. A thick silence hung in the room. The new husband, if he could even call himself that anymore, cleared his throat. Listen, man, I don't want any problems. I turned my gaze to him, and for the first time, I acknowledged his existence. You don't have a problem, I said, my voice sharp. Because you don't have anything. You were just a pawn in their game. And now, you're nothing. His mouth opened slightly, but he had no response. He turned to my wife, as if looking for reassurance, but she didn't meet his eyes. And that's when I saw it. Regret. She had thought she was moving on to something better. That she was trading up. That she had won. But standing here now, in this office, in the presence of the man she had betrayed, she knew. She had made the worst mistake of her life. My father-in-law tried to regain control. You're ruining us, he said, voice quieter now, less certain. I let out a slow breath and stood from my chair, walking over to the window. The city stretched out before me, indifferent to the chaos happening in this room. No, I said, watching the skyline. You ruined yourselves. I turned back to them, meeting my wife's gaze directly. You sat across from me at that dinner table, I said, voice calm, controlled. And you smiled as you erased me. She flinched. You thought I was weak, I continued. You thought I would disappear quietly, that I would beg, that I would accept being discarded like trash. Silence. But you never understood who I was, did you? She swallowed, her throat working hard against the truth. Get out, I said. Her father stiffened. You can't. Get out. My voice was cold steel, the kind of voice that left no room for argument. No space for discussion. No opening for negotiation. And one by one, they turned and walked out of my office. The weight of their downfall clung to them like a second skin. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat back down, exhaling slowly, letting the final remnants of my old life slip away. They thought I was disposable. They thought I was nothing. They were wrong. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking into something far greater. The moment they walked out of my office, I knew the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. They thought I had taken everything by reclaiming the house. That was just the first strike. They had no idea how deep my control over their lives ran. I sat back in my chair, rolling my pen between my fingers, the air in my office thick with the aftermath of the confrontation. My father-in-law had spent years believing he was untouchable, that he could manipulate me into doing his bidding, using his daughter as a leash to keep me in check. But what he failed to realize was that while I had been paying off his debts, I had also been securing power, real power. And now, I was going to use it. My phone buzzed on my desk. I glanced at the screen. Incoming call, bank manager. Right on time. I answered, keeping my voice even. Good morning. Mr. Carter, I wanted to inform you that the loan agreements have been reviewed as per your request. And your name is still listed as the primary cosigner on your father-in-law's business loans. As such, you retain the right to call in the debts or restructure them at your discretion. I smiled. Exactly what I needed to hear. Proceed with the freezes on all accounts, I said, my voice smooth. Effective immediately. There was a brief pause before the manager cleared his throat. Understood, sir. The restrictions will take effect within the next few hours. Perfect. Send me the confirmation when it's done. I hung up, exhaling slowly. This was just the beginning. My father-in-law's business, his pride, his so-called legacy, was barely being held together by financial duct tape. The only reason it had survived this long was because of the credit lines I had guaranteed. And now? Now I was cutting him off. At 3:45 p.m., I received a frantic message from my lawyer. They know. I smirked. Of course, they knew. By 4 p.m., my father-in-law was storming into my office for the second time that day. But this time, there was no arrogance, no condescension in his expression. This time, he was desperate. You can't do this, he snapped, slamming a folder onto my desk. This isn't a game, boy. I picked up the folder and casually flipped through the documents, balance sheets, outstanding loans, overdue payments. I already knew every detail before he walked in, but I let him have his performance. I'm not playing a game, I said, setting the papers down. I'm just taking back what's mine. His face contorted in frustration. I built that company. With my money, I corrected, leaning back. And now I'm done funding your failures. Damn it. He raked a hand through his graying hair, pacing the room. You don't understand how business works. You pull the funding, and everything collapses. That sounds like a you problem. His fists clenched, his breathing uneven. You want revenge? Fine. Take the house. Take your money. But don't burn down my company over this. Revenge. I repeated, tilting my head. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. He scoffed, shaking his head. You think you're punishing me? You're hurting your wife too. Ex-wife? I corrected, my voice calm. And I don't owe her a damn thing. His mouth opened, then closed. He knew I was right. What do you want? He finally muttered, his voice tight. I tapped my fingers against the desk. I want you out. His brow furrowed. Out of what? Everything. I leaned forward. Your company, your influence, your connections. I want your name erased. You step down, sign over full ownership to me, and walk away with whatever dignity you have left. His face twisted in disbelief. You're insane if you think I'll do that. I shrugged. Then I'll let the banks finish what I started. He sucked in a sharp breath, realization hitting him like a freight train. If I withdrew my financial backing and the banks closed in on him, his business wouldn't just suffer, it would disintegrate. His employees would leave, his investors would pull out, and within months, his so-called empire would be nothing but dust. You wouldn't, he whispered. I met his gaze steadily. I would. And I am. The silence stretched between us, thick with tension. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing. He knew he had no leverage. No way out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he exhaled. Fine, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll sign. I nodded, standing. Smart choice. I called my lawyer, instructing him to prepare the documents. By 6 p.m., everything was in motion. By morning, my father-in-law would be nothing more than a footnote in his own company's history. And me? I would own everything. By the time the sun set, my father-in-law had officially signed away everything. His legacy, his power, his name, it was all gone, absorbed into the empire I had quietly built under his nose. But that wasn't enough. See, Men like him don't just fear losing money. They don't fear losing property. They fear losing respect. And that's exactly what I was going to take next. The moment the documents were finalized, my lawyer ensured that the news was sent out to investors, to business partners, to the local press. It wasn't framed as a scandal. No, that would be too easy. It was framed as an announcement, a bold, calculated declaration of new leadership. By the next morning, headlines were running with it. Wealthy CEO steps down, hands over empire to former son-in-law. Corporate takeover, a betrayed husband's rise to power. End of an era. Business titan falls as new leadership takes over. I could imagine the look on his face as he read those words. I could see the slow unraveling of his ego, the cold realization that his name was being erased publicly. It wasn't just about the company. It was about perception. No longer was he the self-made businessman who had commanded respect in every room he walked into. Now, he was the man who had been outplayed by the son-in-law he tried to discard. And as for my wife, she wasn't handling it much better. At exactly 8:30 a.m., my assistant knocked hesitantly on my office door. "Sir, you have a visitor." I already knew who it was. "Send her in," I said, not even bothering to look up. The door swung open, and there she stood, my ex-wife. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but there was a difference now. The confidence she used to carry so effortlessly was gone. She hesitated before stepping inside, as if she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. I let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of it. Finally, she spoke. "You did this," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, finally meeting her gaze. "Did what?" "You destroyed him. You ruined everything." I tilted my head slightly. "I didn't ruin anything. He did that himself. I just took back what was already mine." Her jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw something I never expected to see in her eyes. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of the consequences of her choices. "You don't have to keep going," she said after a moment. "You've made your point." I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the desk. "I have, haven't I?" She shifted uncomfortably. "So what happens now?" I studied her for a long moment before answering. "That depends on you." Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" I stood, walking over to the large window that overlooked the city. "This wasn't just about business. This was about showing you exactly what you threw away." She flinched at that, her nails digging into her palm. "I made a mistake," she whispered. I turned back to face her, my expression unreadable. "You made a choice." She swallowed. "I thought." "You didn't think." I cut in, my voice steady. "You assumed. You assumed I was weak, that I was disposable, that I would crumble the moment you decided I wasn't enough." Silence. She was beginning to understand. "I didn't know my father would." "Stop," I interrupted, shaking my head. "You sat there and watched it happen. You smiled while they dismissed me like I was nothing. You never defended me, never hesitated, never even considered what I had done for you." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Now you want to talk," I said, my voice softer now. "Now, after everything has crumbled, you suddenly realize what you had." Her eyes filled with something close to regret. Is there any way to fix this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I let the question hang between us, studying her carefully. For a brief second, I considered it. Then I smiled. "No." Her shoulders sagged, and just like that, the last thread of hope unraveled. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. Without another word, she turned and walked out of my office. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. I had already moved on. And this time, there was no going back. I knew she wasn't done. Even after she walked out of my office, shoulders slumped, regret pooling in her eyes, I knew she wasn't ready to let go. She thought this was still salvageable. That I was a man she could manipulate, that my emotions would make me cave. She was wrong. By noon, my phone started buzzing again. 12:07 p.m., missed call, ex-wife. 12:15 p.m., missed call, ex-wife. 12:26 p.m., text message. "We need to talk." I stared at the message, unmoved. 12:38 p.m., another text. "Please, please." That was rich, coming from her. I smirked, tossing my phone onto my desk. I wasn't going to respond. Not yet. Let her feel the silence. By the time the clock struck 1 p.m., I wasn't surprised when my assistant knocked hesitantly on my office door again. "Sir, she's here." I didn't even look up. "Let her in." The door creaked open, and I finally lifted my gaze. There she stood, my ex-wife. The woman who once looked at me like I was her entire world, and then later, like I was nothing. But today, she looked at me like I was the only person who could save her. She took slow steps forward, as if uncertain, as if afraid I'd tell her to turn around and leave before she even had a chance to speak. I didn't say anything. I wanted her to start this conversation. She exhaled shakily. I made a mistake. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. She swallowed hard. I thought I knew what I wanted. But No. I cut in, my voice calm. You knew exactly what you wanted. You just didn't expect to regret it. She flinched. I didn't know my father would. Her voice trailed off, like she didn't have the strength to finish that sentence. I tilted my head. Would what? Would throw me aside like I was nothing? Would treat me like a temporary placeholder? You knew. You just didn't care. Her lips parted, but she couldn't argue. Because I was right. I wasn't thinking clearly, she whispered. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, you were thinking just fine when you sat across from me at that dinner table, smiling while your father told me I was being replaced. You were thinking just fine when you decided I wasn't enough for you anymore. She clenched her fists at her sides. I thought I was making the right choice, she admitted. I thought. She stopped herself. I raised a brow. Thought what? She hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing. No, it wasn't nothing. Say it, I pressed. She took a shaky breath. I thought you'd never fight back. I smirked. Oh, so that was it. She thought I would stay quiet, that I would take the humiliation and fade away, that I would slink off, heartbroken, while she moved on without consequence. She never expected me to win. And now that I have, I asked, watching her carefully. Her shoulders tensed. I don't know. I scoffed. Yes, you do. You're here because you want something. Her eyes flickered with something close to desperation. I don't want it to end like this. I exhaled slowly, standing from my chair. How did you think it was going to end? I asked, walking around the desk, closing the distance between us. She swallowed, her throat working against her emotions. I don't know. I thought we could fix this. I finished for her. She nodded quickly. Yes. I studied her for a long moment. Then I laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. Just an amused, tired laugh at how absurd this situation was. You think this is fixable? I said, shaking my head. She bit her lip. Isn't it? I crossed my arms. Tell me something. If I had never fought back, if I had just walked away and let you have your new husband while I disappeared, would you be standing here right now, asking to fix this? Silence. Her expression crumbled. No, she admitted softly. And there it was. She didn't regret losing me. She regretted losing what I had become. She regretted underestimating me. I exhaled, rubbing a hand down my face. You made your choice. She flinched, eyes pleading. I was wrong. Yes, you were. Then let me. No, I said, cutting her off. Her breath hitched. Is there any way to fix this? She whispered. I stared at her, letting the weight of her own question suffocate the air between us. Finally, I gave her the answer she had been dreading. No. She inhaled sharply, her face twisting with emotion. For a second, I thought she might beg, but she didn't. She simply nodded, blinking rapidly as she tried to hold back whatever emotion she had left. And then, without another word, she turned around and walked away. I didn't stop her. I didn't call out to her. I let her go, because this time, there was no going back. She was the one left behind. I knew the moment she walked out of my office that she wouldn't be the last. Desperation doesn't fade overnight. It festers. It lingers in the bones of those who thought they were invincible until they realized they aren't. My ex-wife had taken her shot at redemption and failed. Now, the only person left who still thought he could win was her father. I didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, my assistant knocked on my door, her voice carefully neutral. Sir, he's here. I didn't need to ask who. Let him in, I said, settling back in my chair. The door opened, and my father-in-law stepped inside. Or rather, the man who used to be my father-in-law. The man who once carried himself like a king. The man who had looked me in the eyes and dismissed me as nothing more than a disposable asset. Now, he looked hollow. The tailored suit he always wore looked looser, like he had lost weight overnight. His tie was slightly askew, a detail he would have never tolerated before. His hands, usually steady and firm, twitched at his sides. The fall had begun, and he knew it. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. He hesitated, but he did. For the first time in years, he wasn't dictating the terms of this conversation. I let the silence stretch, watching him. He had been a powerful man for so long, built on arrogance and the assumption that people like me would always bow to him, that I would always be at his mercy. But now, he was at mine. Finally, he cleared his throat. You have everything. What more do you want? I raised a brow. Everything. He nodded stiffly. The house. The company. The reputation. You've taken it all. So tell me, what's left? I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against my desk. Let's get one thing straight. I didn't take anything from you. His jaw tightened. You handed it to me on a silver platter. I continued. You never saw me as a threat. You thought I was a fool, someone who would always be there, always be loyal, always be small. His lips pressed into a thin line. He knew I was right. You taught me something important, I said, my voice measured. Loyalty is worthless to people like you. You don't build things, you take from those who do. He exhaled sharply, his fingers curling against the armrests of the chair. So this is it, he asked, his voice quieter now. You leave me with nothing? I studied him for a long moment. The truth was, I could leave him with nothing. I could make sure that he never recovered from this, that his name became a relic of failure. But I wasn't like him. I don't have to take anything from you, I said finally. You left yourself with nothing. His throat bobbed, and for the first time, I saw it. Not anger, not arrogance, defeat. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? I met his gaze, unflinching. I want you to understand. His brows furrowed. Understand what? What it feels like to be disposable. The words hit him like a slap. For years, he had treated me like a pawn, a tool, a means to an end. Now, for the first time in his life, he was the one being discarded. His breath came slower, more controlled, as he finally understood the weight of what he had done. I leaned back. You made your bed. He swallowed, nodding slowly. And now you get to lie in it. He didn't argue, didn't fight, because for the first time in his life, he knew he couldn't win. He stood, his movements stiff, his face unreadable. This isn't over, he said quietly. But it was. And we both knew it. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my office. And this time, I didn't watch him go, because I didn't need to. His reign was already over. Days passed. The dust settled. My ex-wife had gone quiet. Her father had disappeared from the public eye. The empire he once ruled now bore my name, and every connection he had spent a lifetime building was severing ties with him. He was finished. And as for her, she was still trying to hold on to the last threads of something that no longer existed. It started small. A late-night call that I ignored. Then another. Then came the texts. I know I messed up. Please, just talk to me. I deleted it without reading the rest. By the time the third day rolled around, my assistant handed me an envelope with a hesitant look. She came by this morning, she said. I took it, but I didn't open it. Instead, I turned to my window, staring at the skyline as I listened to the city move beneath me. There was a time when her words would have mattered, when her presence alone could have made me reconsider everything. But that time had passed. I exhaled and tossed the envelope into the drawer, locking it away. That was the final cut. The moment I made peace with the fact that she wasn't worth saving. But just when I thought it was over, just when I thought I could finally close this chapter for good, she tried one last time. That night, my phone buzzed with one final message. I almost ignored it, almost let it go unread like the rest. But something about the simplicity of it made me pause. I still love you. I stared at the words, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just an overwhelming sense of clarity. She thought those words could undo everything, that she could manipulate me into forgetting, into forgiving. But I wasn't that man anymore. I typed 2 words in response. I don't. And then, without hesitation, I blocked her number. That was it. The last tether to my past, severed. I didn't need closure. I already won. The morning after I blocked her number, I woke up to the sound of absolute silence. No calls, no messages, no desperate attempts to reach me. She was finally gone. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in my penthouse, a cup of coffee in one hand, watching the city below. It was a strange feeling, freedom. For 10 years, I had lived under the weight of obligations that weren't mine. For 10 years, I had let people treat me like I was nothing. But now, I was the one standing at the top, and they were the ones scrambling in the rubble. By mid-morning, I was in my office, going over reports when my assistant walked in. "Sir, the investors have backed you. Everything is secured." I smirked. Good. It wasn't just about taking back what was mine. It was about building something they could never touch again. My father-in-law's old company. It was already being rebranded. His name, his legacy, everything tied to him, was being erased. By the time I was done, no one would even remember he had built it in the first place. "What now?" my assistant asked hesitantly. I took a sip of my coffee, glancing at the final contract on my desk. "The last piece of my plan. Now," I said, my voice steady, "I make sure no one ever forgets who built this empire." She smiled. "I never doubted you." As she left, I turned back to the window, letting the weight of everything I had accomplished sink in. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could replace me. But they failed. Because while they had spent years using me, underestimating me, laughing behind my back, I was already building something they could never take. A legacy. A kingdom. And this time, I was the one sitting on the throne.